Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, policies from the pulpit. Also, we look at the travels of Tommy Tuberville. And AMCC strikes out again.
All right, let's see what you can do. Nice velocity.
Losers. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V. Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by Susan Britt, research guru extraordinaire, and Josh Moon, columnist and investigative reporter at APR. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, y'all.
Welcome, Susan.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, Josh is doing a little vacay with the family.
That's right.
It's
That's right. Yeah, doing a little traveling. I have not been kidnapped. I hope y'all like my lamp.
Yeah,
It's very nice.
It's a lovely
Lovely
lamp.
color. Yeah.
Like that.
I do like the color of that shirt, though. It
Oh.
looks good on you.
Well, thank you.
Well, and speaking of green, the Alabama Medical Cannabis Commission got slapped around once again by Judge James Anderson. If these guys were the Three Stooges, they would be one. You know, the Three Stooges couldn't be this bad.
No.
I mean, Susan. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And now they're on a three-peat. The judge has said you got to start back over again.
Mm-hmm.
So this is 3 strikes and you're out. What are you gonna do?
With all the licenses now are invalid. So now they've got to, as we've been saying all along, start over. The problem with this, though, is even in starting over, it's going to be another year. And it's already been 5 years since it was legalized. So we're talking about 6 years in
Yeah.
before any possibility of anybody getting the relief from the medical cannabis that they need.
Josh, I mean, the guy who did the bill, Dr. Tim Melson, who sponsored the bill, the judges, the lawyers, everyone has said, you did it wrong. You did it wrong. And yet
Repeatedly.
they're still defiant. And who knows if they'll ever get it right.
Yeah, man, it's kind of infuriating to watch this continue on like as it is, and for people to pretend as though the folks who have filed lawsuits are somehow in the wrong about this.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, I get it that they say it's sour grapes. Yeah, it's sour grapes. It's sour grapes that they didn't get a license when they felt like they should have gotten a license because the process wasn't very fair.
Right.
And the problem that they have is the AMCC didn't follow the Alabama Administrative Procedures Act. And there's no question of this at this point. There's no doubt that didn't occur. And so now, I mean, I've never understood why they didn't just start from the very beginning and go back and say, okay, here's the process we have to follow. Let's fix these flaws. Let's do this thing the right way, and let's do it. We could have had this thing done 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
If they had just in the initial problems that they had with those ridiculous scores from the just arbitrary testing that they did. It was just the most absurd thing ever. And if they had just fixed that and come out and said, let's do this, but no, instead they went with this emergency rule that they had, which actually kind of tried to go back and fix a lot of these things. The problem is they wanted to fix some things, but they wanted to leave the scores in. So they went with the emergency rule approach to this thing. And that's what Judge Anderson deemed invalid this last week. And he did so because there are certain things that you have to meet for it to be the definition of an emergency. And they didn't meet any of them.
They didn't. And someone was complaining about, well, it took so long to rule on it. Well, the reason it took so long is because the AMCC, kept throwing up barriers and filing countersuits And really, I mean, I don't want to blame it all on the lawyers, but the AMCC lawyers have done a great job of muddying the waters on this. But John McMillan, once again, has shown that he is not willing to lead this group to get the right results. But again, meanwhile, the truth is, patients, people that would be patients, are suffering.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot get the relief they need because these people aren't doing the
And
job.
let us not forget, when all of this started, there was no anticipation of the state having to cover all these legal fees for the AMCC.
Right.
I mean, this is a burden on the taxpayers for all of this litigation that's going on.
Yeah, and it's been millions of dollars.
Yes, it
and
has.
with no results. One thing that I did learn this week, and I thought it was pretty impressive, there is a plan, there's a bill to try to help finance rural hospitals. Now, this is not a perfect plan. Expanding Medicaid would be a perfect plan, but we can't do that here because it's ideologically unpopular. But a bill sponsored by Terry Collins and April Weaver wrote about it this past week in APR, and it allows the people to give donations, tax-free donations. They can take it off their state income taxes, Susan. That would help rural hospitals. This has been done in Georgia and successfully so.
Yeah, it has. And it works like, you get 100% credit for the donation to the rural hospitals with caps for individuals and corporations. And it's all pre-approved by the Department of Revenue. But what this does, I mean, we've had 7 rural hospitals closed so far. We've got 52 in the state. I think 19 are in danger right now.
Right.
And I think this is just brilliant that this bill is actually going to be able to redirect some of these funds to be able to help those hospitals, because at least there's a plan. At least we're starting somewhere with a plan for once.
And Josh, I have to say, Terry Collins and April Weaver have come with some of the better bills that the Republicans have offered this year. But while an imperfect plan, it's a plan.
Pretty damn low bar on both counts.
Yeah.
Pretty low bar on both.
At least they're setting a bar.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah. Look, is somebody doing something? Yeah. Okay. I mean, yes, they are, and that's great and all. I mean, look, we've had a Medicaid expansion sitting out there now for years. Every expert who's looked at this has told us what this would do. The hospital association, every economic impact study that we've had, everything that we've laid out on the table has said, if you want to save a lot of your rural hospitals, it won't save all of them, but it save a lot of them. This is the way to do it. And it is simply because Alabama has such a problem with low-income people not being able to meet the payments that it costs them to go into hospitals and receive treatments. And these hospitals cannot get a reimbursement for it. And that's the problem that we have. That's the solution. Okay. That's the solution to your problem. You can combine both things. You can still do the tax donations and do the Medicaid expansion, and maybe you would save even more rural hospitals that way.
Well, and that's true. But and right now, with the new Trump administration, there's no guarantee that any of this is going to remain the way it is. So right now, everything is in flux. And a lot of people are confused and worried. But we're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back.
Your home is your most valuable asset. But what if someone tried to steal it from you? Property fraud is one of the fastest growing areas of fraud in the country today.
As a district attorney, I've seen firsthand the devastating effects of property fraud. That's why I'm proud to support the Montgomery County Probate Court's REACT program.
REACT is designed to protect your property and to give you peace of mind. By signing up, you'll receive an email notification if a document is filed against your property.
This program is a game changer. It has the potential to prevent fraud and protect countless homeowners throughout Montgomery County.
So don't wait. Sign up for REACT today and protect your home.
Protect your home with REACT. Sign up today.
Alabama has a hands-free driving law, and that means you can't hold your mobile phone while making a call. Oh, and no writing messages, recording, or watching videos either. Plus, you can only use a single button or swipe of a finger to answer a call. So what's a driver to do? Alabama's hands-free driving law is in effect. Follow it.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. Tommy Tuberville, last week, as rumored, and it was pretty well backed up, met with a group of donors and said that he was planning on running for governor, soon to be announced in May. Now, however, this is Pine Box Tuberville, Pine Box Tommy, who says one thing a lot and then does another thing. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things we've been looking into is the residency issue of Tommy Tuberville. And last week, I wrote an article that showed that Tuberville has a very clever way of travel. In other words, he'll use money out of his pack, coach pack or one of his packs, to fly down to Florida. Mm-hmm. And then he will send the Senate a bill for his trips back. Now, the reason that is, Susan, and I'll let you and Josh get into this, is that the Senate rules state that a senator can fly from anywhere to D.C. and the Senate will pay for it. The taxpayers will pay for it. But they won't pay you, they will pay for you to fly home. But Tommy Tuberville has been flying to the Panhandle of Florida. He has taken some trips to Atlanta, but then after that, the travel disappears. He has charged those trips to Atlanta, but there are no cars, there's no rentals, there's no this. And Josh, you pointed out, and when we were looking at this, something that really sort of smacks of, hey, he lives in Panama City, or not Panama City, but he lives in the Panhandle, because he uses the same taxi service year after year, flight after flight.
Yeah, it's he pays 38 taxi and shuttle service a ton of money, man. $11,000 over the last couple of years for a number of different trips, and he's back and forth from, I'm assuming, an airport to his home for pickup service. And look, it's just, the man lives in Florida.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's all there is to it. The man lives in Florida, and I mean, he can claim that there's this residence in Alabama, in Auburn or whatever, that is owned by his wife and son, and that's their primary residence and all. It's nonsense. No, everybody knows that he's not living in that house, and he's not living in that house, and nobody expects him to live in that house. And as long as he's in the Senate, that's fine.
Yep.
He meets the rules and the standards for that. Now, I mean, it's not fine in practice. He's not representing his district very well, I don't think, with all the time that he spends in another state. However, according to Senate rules, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. But when you're running for governor and you've got to be living continuously in this state for 7 years, that's a problem. I mean, it's a pretty big problem.
And Susan, the evidence is overwhelming with his travel, mm-hmm. with what he has said himself. His wife lives in the $6 million mansion, mm-hmm. works in that area, Santa Rosa Beach. The man goes there all the time, but he continues to lie and say, well, he lives in a modest house in Auburn when he doesn't go to Auburn.
We can find no travel records of him going to Auburn.
Right.
That's the one thing we cannot find. It should be overwhelmingly abundant. If he lives in Auburn, we should be able to find those records. We can find nothing. We can't find any taxi records. We can't find any flight records. We can't find anything to get him from Atlanta to Auburn. The only time that Auburn appears is when he's doing like a tour where he's going to Montgomery and Auburn and Prattville and, several places all at the same time on one trip. It's not, there is no record of him actually traveling to Auburn as a final destination.
I would think that any voter would be outraged to know that they are paying $11,000 or for Tommy Tuberville to take taxis or shuttle service mm-hmm. to his $1 million mansion on the beach.
On Florida, taxi service is making the money off of it, not an Alabama taxi service.
But the thing is, if Tuberville were to announce he's running for governor, then it's up to the Alabama Republican Party to certify that he is qualified to run. Now, if they followed the law and tracked down where he actually lived,
the constitutional part of it.
This is Alabama
This is constitutional requirement
that he lived here 7 consecutive years. Now, John Wall, the head of ALGOP, has told people privately that he will certify Tuberville no matter what.
And he knows that he doesn't live here.
Right. He can't miss that he doesn't live here. Now, Josh, we're also hearing that President Donald Trump is going to endorse Tuberville if he runs. Now, President Trump has a mixed history here. He endorsed Roy Moore. Roy Moore got killed by a Democrat, Doug Jones. He endorsed Mo Brooks, and Katie Britt wiped Mo Brooks off the face of the political map. So he doesn't have a great history. But what I don't understand is why the president would want to put his stamp on yet another guy who could likely be beaten. Because I think you're going to see Will Ainsworth in this, no matter who endorses whom, because Will Ainsworth, I think, has the fire in the belly to be governor, and I don't think Tuberville does.
Yeah, Tuberville's gonna come in obviously as a favorite.
Yeah.
I think everybody understands that right now, right off the top, because he's got the name identification. Everybody knows kind of who he is, and he's been around for a little bit and all that. But I do think a lot of these questions. I mean, first of all, he's in kind of a little bit of a box with this stuff that we just talked about, where either he lives in Florida or he's charging taxpayers a lot of money to fly him back to DC from his vacation home in Florida. And so things like that are going to be an issue that can be raised over and over and over again while he's on the campaign trail. And this is going to be a tougher campaign trail than the one he faced against Jeff Sessions for Senate. If Will Ainsworth, is in this and wants to take a hard run at it like he says he's going to. And he says he's going to do this. He said it many times now that I'm staying in this and I'm in it for the long haul. And I take him at his word. And I think that's going to be a hell of a problem for Tommy Tuberville.
I think the thing that makes no sense at all is why Tommy Tuberville would give up a seat in the U.S. Senate to come back to Alabama, a place he doesn't live, where his wife doesn't want to live, and run for governor. And obviously he thinks that running for governor is an easy job. Susan, we got about 15 seconds. Can you make any sense out of this, or is there any sense of craziness?
I don't think there's any sense to be made. We've talked to people, we've talked amongst ourselves, and it makes absolutely no sense that he would want to take a pay cut, that he would want to have to actually do work and actually travel the state and to live here. He's not going to be able to get away with living in Florida as governor.
And there's no way he can be Tammy Tuberville in Alabama, because we just won't have it. All right, we're going to leave it right there. You're watching the voice of Alabama politics.
Alabama has a hands-free driving law, and that means you can't hold your mobile phone while making a call. Oh, and no writing messages, recording, or watching videos either. Plus, you can only use a single button or swipe of a finger to answer a call. So what's a driver to do? Alabama's hands-free driving law is in effect. Follow it.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. We had a couple really good op-eds in APR this week from our Republican representatives, and Well, one of the guys that wrote one this week, Representative Rex Reynolds, and I think Rex Reynolds is a serious man who is there in the Senate and in the House for the right reasons. Now, he and Greg Albritton, Senator Greg Albritton, have been chairing this oversight committee of the opioid funds that Alabama receives. And Susan, he points out in this opinion column that Alabama has been doing a lot of good work. This commission has been doing a lot of good work to make sure that the opioid funding, the lawsuit that we got the opioid from, goes to people who actually are addicted to get them help. This is so counterintuitive to a lot of things Alabama does that, you know, when I was reading the op-ed, I was like, holy cow, they're really doing something well here.
Yeah, they are. We're talking about $300 million where the pharmaceuticals companies had to cough up the money because of the opioid crisis. And, you know, they're really doing some good stuff where they're investing in higher education, veteran services, law enforcement training, public awareness, things like Narcan, which is the overdose drug, the fentanyl testing strips. That's really helping people, especially overcome their opioid addictions or save somebody that's in a crisis.
I mean, Josh, it's nice to see this money going to help people who have problems rather than going to frivolous things like we see so often.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And it's nice to see that people are actually putting in some time and effort, and doing some hard work in making sure that this thing actually gets sent to people that need the help too. Now, I mean, that doesn't happen all the time. It should happen a lot more, and we should demand it a lot more of the people who we pay for this public service. But I just feel like that Greg Albritton and Rex Reynolds and the folks who have been involved in this, they've done a really good job of trying to determine who needs it and to dole it out in a manner that makes sense. Yeah. And I think that's the big thing here. We got a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense. Right. We talked about the AMCC and the open of this thing. And on the heels of that, I mean, to watch people actually take the job seriously and to do a good job is really nice to see.
And that's when you make policy based on what's best and not some personal belief or some fantasy that you have.
Right. And to understand the gravity of this, over 6,800 individuals were helped last year.
And that really should be the purpose of government.
That's what government's for.
To help those who can't help themselves, to lift people up. But, we've gotten into a state where our politicians basically are using the pulpit as the launching point for policy. And by that, I mean that we have so many laws that are being passed and policies that are being put into place that are strictly based on a particular religious view of the world. Now, we've seen this throughout history where theocracies take root. If you go back to the 1500s and Italy, and the bonfire of the vanities, where people were instructed to burn their precious things, to burn art, to burn makeup, to burn what was considered vanity. This was fear and coercion to follow a particular type of religious belief through law. And we've seen it in the Taliban, we've seen it in Afghanistan, and we're seeing a light version of it here. And they want to implement faith through fear and coercion and public policy. This is not the way the Constitution was laid out, no matter your fantasy about it being the Constitution being based on the Bible. It isn't. It's European Enlightenment. Go ahead.
But yeah, I was listening to someone this morning who said, he's watched so many, and we have watched so many lawmakers hold a prayer vigil or prayer session right before they walk into the State House to cut health care.
Yeah.
Where is the gospel of Jesus in that?
Yeah.
That you're going to pray and then go hurt people.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what they're doing. They're dividing people with this LGBTQ stuff. They're dividing people with these libraries. They're just dividing people and pushing people down in the name of the Bible and Jesus. And it's not exactly what was written in the New Testament that I've read.
Yeah, well, it's not there. I mean, Josh, we talked about this before, but when we mix politics and religion, we get bad policies and we get bad religion. You know what I mean? It doesn't enhance either one of them.
No, it doesn't. And you read back at so often. You look back at where the country used to be, and a lot of people talk about the good old days of the country or whatever, the golden years and that type of thing. And there for so long, this type of stuff was not tolerated.
No.
This was not the prayer stuff and the whatever religion you practiced and stuff. That was considered something that you did at home. That was something that you did on your time and that you kept to yourself and that people didn't really talk about a whole lot. And especially in terms of politics. Matter of fact, it used to be very, very taboo to introduce some things like what we introduce now on a daily basis.
Yeah.
People would have been aghast in the 1950s and 60s and especially the 70s to hear some of these things that we now normalize and stuff. And that's it's because this is not the way the place was founded. We have had a slow and steady march towards this through the money that churches and other people have dumped into politics and the control that they've been able to grab. And it's not the right way. It's not. And it because, as I say all the time, the pages that we wrote the Constitution on, that those men went in the room and wrote, they were blank when they started.
Yeah.
They could have put anything they wanted on there.
Yeah.
And what they put was freedom from religion on there and freedom of religion.
I do not have any problems with any faith that people want to believe. What I do have a problem with is when people try to, impose their faith upon other people. We should have the right to believe and the right not to believe, because that is the American way. But anyway, we're going to have to leave it right there. You've been watching the voice of Alabama politics. You watch us because we watch them.